Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know I grew up Triumph Village in the countryside. And I remember my grandmother used to rear a lot of what we call Creole fowl. I think the Jamaicans, they call it yard fowl. What we had the last 35 minutes is fluttering and flattering of a headless Creole fowl. And so,
Honourable Minister, you're imputing something against the Honourable Member, headless Creole fowl. Please, let us keep it honourable.
Mr. Speaker, I am saying, Mr. Speaker, that the opposition represented in this National Assembly, as they will prove to the people of this country the next 5 years, is a barnyard of headless Creole fowls. Headless yard fowls. Mr. Speaker, what we will have the next 5 days is not people addressing this budget. You will have the immoral speak to us about morality. The corrupt speak to us about corruption. Those who are incapable speak about their capacity. That is what we will have, Mr. Speaker, over the next 5 years. Not the budget presented. Every measure they condemn, they are intellectually incapable of putting a measure alongside it before the guy needs speak. Every measure, not airbrains, wild things, things that can be measured. Mr. Speaker, the Honourable Member just spoke about what we could do. The fact is, 18 months ago, they were in government. For 5 years. The Honourable Member spoke about free tuition at the University of Guyana. I dare remind you, Honourable Member, that your political entity over the period raised the University of Guyana tuition fees by 35% over a period of 3 years. So you come to this house and you pontificate about what should be done. You had your opportunity to do that. You squandered it, and that is the reason why you will grow old over there in the seats of the opposition. Mr. Speaker, again, the Honourable Member spoke about moving the city. 5 years. The major project of this set of people, honorable people over there, was a corrupt, transacted project named the Durban Park, where vagrants reside as I speak to you, Mr. Speaker. All the things that could be done. Mr. Speaker, again, the Honourable Member addressing Foreign Relations spoke to the issue of, let me say let me repeat, how Guyana was above their weight in the foreign service arena. I dare remind the Honourable Member, maybe she was not born at that time or young enough, or too young to understand, that during that period you talk about, Guyanese starved and could not get food to eat. Basic food items in this country. I am old enough to point that out. So, why do you talk about, Mr. Speaker, she said, the power of diplomacy of Guyana during those years of the so-called power of diplomacy the citizens of this country could not get food to eat. Mr. Speaker, again, the honorable member spoke about the issue of vision. Oh my God. My God. Vision. Lightning should have struck her down when she used that word over there. The most visionless government we have ever had in the history of this country was 5 years ago. The honorable member spoke about care for the children. Her government took away $1.6 billion from children and utilized it to buy more food for people at the office of the president. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member, the nation must be reminded that this government took away a grant subsidy to elderly people, and she talked about the pension, where it should have gone. When they came into government, they took away the subsidy from the elderly people for water and light, and if that was not bad enough, they added 14% VAT on light bill and water bill. So the nation must be reminded that when you come to this National Assembly, you must be honest. Mr. Speaker, the wannabe opposition leader, Mr. Speaker, wannabe opposition leader is trying to lecture us, this government, about how to govern, and yet they are a spectacle to the nation, incapable of even electing or selecting opposition leader. And you lecture people how to govern. You're incapable of deciding who will lead you. How will you govern a nation? So, Mr. Speaker, you don't know who is in or who is out. They themselves don't even know who is in and who is out. Mr. Speaker, I bring these things to the attention of the nation so that people can recognize when you come to this National Assembly and you seek to criticize government policy, you must be seen in the eyes of the public being able to present yourself as a government in waiting. You are incapable of doing that. Unelectable. Mr. Speaker, so, as I said when I started, the thing about it, don't matter how, you know, Mr. Speaker, the experience was, when you cut off the head of the fowl, it's a lot of flattering and fluttering. But the fowl know that I will die very soon. Mr. Speaker, the honorable member spoke about the issue of training of our people for the new industries. Under this government, APNU AFC government, they reduced TVET training to a meager 1,300 people a year at the Board of Industrial Training. Meager, because when the PV was in government, it was in the thousands, and we have returned there again. So you come here and you talk about training. You had 5 years to train. Who did you train? Mr. Speaker, I was in Kokwani, where we had 100 and odd persons in Kokwani trained in TVET, and they testified that it was the first time a graduation ceremony ever happened in the town of Kokwani. Mr. Speaker, let him again 152 persons from Lethem and different regions being trained in all different technical disciplines. Again, Mr. Speaker, they testified that it was the first time a graduation of this sort was happening in Region 9 in Lethem, thanks to the People's Progressive Party Civic Government. Mr. Speaker, just in our full year in 2021, we increased training at the Board of Industrial Training by over 100%. Mr. Speaker, secondly, Mr. Speaker, today, every region in this country, you have a technical officer that supervises TVET training. As indicated, yes, for the first time, I am dealing with your 5 years of incompetence. Mr. Speaker, on the labor front, we have expanded, and as I speak to you, first time in the history of this country, every region except for Region 8, a Ministry of Labor department exists. And you care so much about workers' rights and paying attention to workers. Mr. Speaker, the irony is that when they're in opposition, they become bright people. But when they're in government, they are the dullest of the dull. That is what is happening here. Suddenly they're bright like light. And when they were in government, the evidence suggests it was blackout. Mr. Speaker, look, Mr. Speaker, let me give you one testimony of a young woman, one of many, Karawab on the Pomeroon River. Listen to what a young lady had to say about training. Mr. Speaker, today, my name is Iona Courtman. Throughout my 19 years of life, I've never done anything that made me develop extreme dedication until the Ministry of Labor Board of Industrial Training Program came to Karawab in the Pomeroon River. Throughout the 4 months, when it was time for class, I would wake up early, before the sunrise, do my chores, knit up my uniform, and paddle in my canoe boat for 20 minutes to the training location. Today, I am no longer a trainee. I am so grateful for the knowledge I have received. And to top it off, we were not pushed aside after the training ended. My classmates and I were privileged to have the Minister of Labor, Joseph Hamilton, taking time out to come to Karawab and to witness what we have done. Mr. Speaker, what these 11 young people did for their community after training. 9 ladies and 2 men. 11 young persons for the community of Karawab were able to develop a skill set in the installation of maintenance of solar system. Our community building 60 by 40 equipped with electricity for the first time on a full-time basis. It allows for charging of cell phones, using of the community building for concerts and other related activities. Also, the power can be used to facilitate further training programs, such as garment construction and electricity electrification installation, and others. Installation of solar lights at the entrance of the health center, school compound, and the cell phone signal spot so that persons can traverse in the night with less fear for reptiles. Mr. Speaker, this is one testimony of what the People's Progressive Party Civic we have done. Mr. Speaker, the Board of Industrial Training, as I said, we started with this failed government, average 1,300 persons being trained mostly on the coastline. Today, in every region and sub-region, the Board of Industrial Training executes technical and vocational training for the citizens of this country. In 2021, 3,086 persons were trained. So when the honorable member speaks to the issue of our training, we are far ahead of you. Far ahead, way ahead of you. You know now you know. Under your tenure, we were an oil-producing nation, and you didn't train one scintilla of anybody to participate in oil and gas. And now you come and you tell us about what kind of training we must do. Mr. Speaker, under your stewardship, no, we want you to do some community service for the money you spent. Community service, Honorable Member Ely. We will not take it back. Community service. Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. The UPNO AFC government, we had, as a nation, all production offshore. And this government never saw it fit to train occupation and safety and health officers so that they can go and review the operations of the FPSO. I could recall other people went on the FPSOs to hit a champagne bottle. Most importantly, so they were nowhere aware how the Guyanese people working in the oil and gas sector offshore, how their health and safety is protected. I can report to this National Assembly, again for the first time, Madam Ely, the first time an OSH officer was able to grace the presence of an FPSO in the Atlantic was under the stewardship of the People's Progressive Party. First time. Mr. Speaker, first time again. 2021. First time. 14 technical officers of the OSH department were trained at the highest technical level and certified as ISO 45001 lead auditors so that they can do inspection whether in oil and gas or any place else. That is the record. What have you done? Oil and gas came under your tenure. 2015. You never thought it important. You never thought it important. Oh boy. Somebody just wake up. Mr. Speaker, importantly, Mr. Speaker, under the UPNO AFC government, They never recognized, Mr. Speaker, that it was important to place on ships that come into this country visitation of occupation, safety, and health officers and labor officers. They never thought it important. And more so, when the honorable member, my colleague, Minister of Public Works, has indicated that because of the dynamic development of this country under the PPP, we have moved from average 9 ships entering the Maria River to 52 per day, per week. And never they thought these things were important. Mr. Speaker, in their last year in government, and the population must know this, 32 persons, Mr. Speaker, lost their lives in job-related accidents. And what they did, all they did was a lot of commission of inquiry. Nothing to remedy the problem. I can report to this nation that the first year under the People's Progressive Party civic government, Mr. Speaker, the employment deaths in workplaces, it has decreased by 16% in the first year of the People's Progressive Party civic. That is a record. I know. I know sometime in this debate, a couple of days from now, honorable member, General Secretary of the Guyana Teachers Union will speak, and she will pontificate about labor relations. But Mr. Speaker, the record suggests that all the conversation she will give us about what should be done, the only thing that has happened so far as regards our Kenya is misadvising the teachers to strike. That's the only misadvising. Mr. Speaker, labor relations. Labor relations, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, you're aware, very much aware about these matters I speak to. Mr. Speaker, we dealt with matters that were languishing under the new AFC government. Justice for workers, because Honorable Member Coretta MacDonald will come and talk about how they care about workers. Matters that were languishing there since 2016 that they failed to pay attention to. Mr. Speaker, I can report that the first time and the first year of the People's Progressive Party civic government, we were able to recoup over $38 million for workers that were owed by him. That is a record. Mr. Speaker, again, and labor relations. Mr. Speaker, when we came to office, there were several collective labor agreements languishing out there to be concluded. Workers were suffering. What did they do? NOTH, ING. Mr. Speaker, the record is 22 collective labor agreements we were able to broker and mediate in the first year of the People's Progressive Party. Many of them languishing since 2015. That is the record. Conciliation, the record speaks to 2015. Mr. Speaker, conciliation, 19. In one instance, Mr. Speaker, the Demerara Timbers Limited refused to even sit at the same table with GAU under this government, under the APNU government. I'm pointing. You have to pay attention. You have to pay attention. Mr. Speaker, and I say this, I will say this for the Guyanese people so they understand, and I hope the Minister of Finance and the Commissioner General pays attention to what I'm about to say. The APNU AFC government colluded. The APNU AFC government colluded with expatriate companies to ensure tax evasion by workers. This is a serious allegation. I have the evidence. They deliberately colluded with foreign governments to ensure that workers did not pay taxes and overtime. Because, as they see it, Mr. Speaker, as they saw it, Mr. Speaker, if they do that, the people would not see they're working for a lot of money. The evidence, you want the evidence? Call it, I'll bring the evidence. Mr. Speaker, 930 persons were trained, Mr. Speaker, in labor laws and regulations. Mr. Speaker, we closed 837 complaints, many of them languishing under the previous government. And you know what is to note? In the APNU AFC tenure, you know they had 4 labor ministers. One a year that did nothing. 4 labor ministers and all these things they could not do. Mr. Speaker, honorable member, they know the ministers. Mr. Speaker, the evidence always speaks for itself. Not the fluttering and fluttering. Evidence always speaks for itself. You should ask your good colleague whether they have a minister, the man with the sled program. Ask her, he would know whether they have a minister or not. Mr. Speaker, and let me say this because my time is gone. Mr. Speaker, I am told that the honorable member, Ms. Jarita Finance, will be interrogating honorable member Ms. Jarita Finance. She will be interrogating and analyzing the budget of Dr. Ashni Kumar Singh. You know, overnight, I thought about this. How do you move from Frank Oak, Kenneth King, even Carl Greenidge, and you end up at Jarita Finance? Just think about it, honorable member. Most honorable member. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Speaker, that is the reason why when I started, I made the point that what you have in the opposition is a barnyard of headless yardful. Degeneration. Frank Hope, Kenneth King, Carl Greenidge, and Ms. Finance, honorable member. Mr. Speaker, you would know that. Mr. Speaker, as regards the central recruitment and manpower agency of which we have supervision. During the period, the agency registered 1,171 persons who are seeking employment.
You have to seek an extension, Honorable Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I would like to ask that the honourable member be given 5 minutes more to conclude his presentation in accordance with the agreement between the two chief whips. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister Teixeira. Honorable Minister Labour, you may continue to conclude.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, of those persons who sought job during the period through recruitment and manpower agency, some 731 of those persons, their names were submitted for possible employment placement. Mr. Speaker, 186 persons were placed. Others are awaiting interview, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a total of 1,554 visits were conducted to solicit vacancies for people who seek employment. Mr. Speaker, presently, as indicated by His Excellency the President some time ago, we are about to launch a job bank where all citizens who seek jobs, they can go there, post their credentials. All employers who have vacancies, they can go there and post those vacancies, so that the potential employees and employers, they can have interaction on this platform. Mr. Speaker, that is the record. I suppose none of the four ministers that were employed in the 5 years of the APNU AFC government, they didn't even talk about these things. Nowhere in their contemplation. Mr. Speaker, the fact is, Honorable Member Ramjatan, if you ever thought about it, when Honorable Member Winston Jordan was presenting his budget for 5 years, he would have put it in a budget document. Mr. Speaker, the record, we stand on our record, and nothing you say or do will change that. Every road that will be built will change the lives of Guyanese people. Every farm to market road, it will change the lives of the farmers and their families. Every school that will be built will change the lives of the children of the poor and all Guyanese. Mr. Speaker, every hospital that will be built will ensure that the lives of our people are protected. Mr. Speaker, the Honorable Member David Patterson, aka Bangles, he will come here and speak about no need for the gas to shore project for electricity. But at the same time, he will not say to us and to the nation, if we don't do that, what else to do? They're always devoid of a recommendation. He will come and he will say, no Amalia. But at the same breath, he will not say, if not Amalia, what else? Because we have to have power. The gentleman will come, Mr. Speaker, Honorable Member, and speak to the fact that the bridge to go over the Damara River is situated at the wrong place. But you know what, Mr. Speaker? After spending unauthorized $300 million, this gentleman, Mr. Speaker, presented to the Guyanese people a 3-lane bridge over the river. First time in history of the world. Mr. Speaker, 3 lanes after spending $300 million. $300 million. Mr. Speaker, yes, it's 100 million. Feasibility I'm talking about here, not building the bridge. Mr. Speaker, every measure, every program, every project presented to the National Assembly and to the people of Guyana will change the lives of the Guyanese people. That is the record of the People's Progressive Party Civic. Thank you very much.